Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this, the 46th TB Macaulay Lecture, funded by the Macaulay Development Trust and jointly organised with a partner, the James Hutton Institute. It is great to see so many in the audience, indeed near a sellout, I'm told. I'm really looking forward to this lecture. I got a slight preview last night at a roundtable dinner, so you are in for a most enjoyable and enlightening evening, I assure you. I am now pleased to welcome to the stage our next speaker, Dr. Gary Gillespie, the Scottish Government's Chief Economic Advisor, providing the First Minister and Ministers with advice across a range of strategic economic issues in Scotland. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Like Joe, I get a chance to have a discussion with Kate last night, and I've also had the pleasure of hearing her speaking before as well, so we're definitely in for a treat. So I've got a few minutes, and what I wanted to do was just to reflect a little bit on the context for the economic strategy and approach in Scotland, and I'll just reflect a little bit on the most recent period if I can. So I think a couple of points to say at the outset. Economic strategies tend to reflect the economic circumstances at the time and the opportunities. So, I think you'll see that reflected in the lecture. And I think a general point I would say in Scotland, certainly over the last period since 2007, is we've seen a gradual shift towards kind of more socio-economic, environmental kind of focused approaches. Now, obviously that's reflected in climate targets, nature targets, but also I think more importantly reflecting the kind of interlinkage and dependencies of kind of taking a system approach. So our First Minister would say no department can solve the problems that we face. You've got to kind of break down silos, you've got to kind of join up. So I think there's something in recognising that, and that's really important. So just to give you a very quick flavour, 2007 economic strategy was largely a growth strategy. So it was based on the kind of principles of growth, but even that strategy had conditionality around income, solidarity, who's benefiting, and cohesion, thinking about the spread of growth. You fast forward to 2011, we've obviously had the financial crisis. Kate may touch on that. And so the 2011 strategy kind of reflected on that, updated on that, but also interestingly introduced the kind of low carbon economy and this opportunity that was there, particularly for decarbonising electricity. And actually that was one of the successes over that period. If you look at electricity supply in Scotland relative to its 1990 levels, carbon's down 93%, so it's been decarbonised against an overall drop of the kind of carbon footprint of 51% on the same basis. And then quickly, if I move to 2015, there's a kind of marked shift in the strategy with a kind of much more socio-economic introduction of two pillars, still improving competitiveness, but also reducing inequality, and also introduced natural capital as well, the importance of ecosystems and underpinning many of our economic assets, our way of life and stuff. So that was kind of a marked change. And one other thing's worth pointing out is the importance of place, a recognition about place and the different approaches that can happen. So I'm going quickly now to kind of 2022, and that was the last strategy that was published, and it's called the National Strategy for Economic Transformation. And it was deliberately a kind of decade of change. If you think of the context again, post-COVID, the climate and nature challenges that we face, and the vision within NSET was really, I think, touches on some of the work that Kate will talk about, was really about a society thriving across economic, social and environmental domains. So there's something really fundamental. What was different from previous strategies, emphasis on fair work, good jobs, transition to net zero at the heart of it, and looking at the opportunities that are there from the Green Industrial Strategy. that was published last year, and the kind of opportunities for energy. Entrepreneurship's there as well, but that's the general thrust. And I should say, and a big theme on delivery as well. If I can kind of wrap up my comments just to say, the overlay to that approach kind of goes back to my opening remarks about kind of taking a system-wide perspective, recognising interdependencies and linkages. And our First Minister, if he was here, would talk about his 4 priorities: eradicating child poverty, net zero transition, sustainable inclusive growth, and resilient and high quality public services. Now, the reason I mention those is when we come on to Kate's lecture, you'll see a lot of different things, and there's a question about where you start, and I think this is where the priorities in Scotland are at the moment. So I will stop there. It's been lovely to come along and get to say a few words, and I'll pass back to Debs.
So thank you, Gary, for setting out some core key elements of the Scotland economic strategy and for stressing that systems approach, which I think links really well to the main speaker tonight. And good evening, everybody. I'm Deb Roberts, and I'm the Deputy Chief Executive of the James Hutton Institute. And it is a massive honour to be able to introduce our speaker tonight, Professor Kate Raworth, and to chair the question and answer session that's going to follow. Now, Kate is an economist whose work has literally reshaped the contemporary debates on sustainable development. Her internationally best-selling book, which I'm sure we've all got a copy of probably, Doughnut Economics, 7 Ways to Think Like a 21st Century Economist, has been translated into over 20 languages, and as we will learn in the next hour, it's captured the imagination all around the world, from classrooms to city halls, from activists to policymakers. Now, over the past 30 years, Kate's career has been very varied, from working with micro-entrepreneurs in the villages of Zanzibar to co-authoring the Human Development Report for the UNDP in New York, followed by a decade as a senior researcher at Oxfam. She's currently the senior teaching or a senior teaching fellow at Oxford University's Environmental Change Institute and professor of practice at Amsterdam's University of Applied Sciences. She's also, really importantly, the co-founder of the Doughnut Economics Action Lab, which puts Doughnut economics into practice and which we will also learn about in the coming hour. Now, like all of you, I'm sure we're very much looking forward to hearing her ideas for rethinking economics for a just and safe future. So without further delay, please join me in giving a very warm and enthusiastic welcome to Kate Raworth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am really, really delighted and extremely honoured to be here. Thank you to the Macaulay Development Trust. Thank you to the James Hutton Institute for inviting me. And thank you to all of you for coming. I'm kind of wondering why you've come. If you've come for the donuts, spoiler alert, they are conceptual. If you've come for the economics, so have I. I'm going to tell you why I'm here. Like, why, you know, I often think, how did I end up here? Why am I here? I'm here because I went to university in 1990. I'm 54. I wanted to study the mother tongue of public policy. I was a child of the 1980s, so I saw on the TV news a famine in Ethiopia. I saw a hole opening up in the ozone layer, the Exxon Valdez ships spilling oil into Alaska's pristine waters. And I remember the first time watching telly when the presenter said there's this thing called the greenhouse effect. And so I wanted to help. I wanted to help tackle these issues. And I thought, if I study economics, I'll have the tools and equipment to help do something about this. So off I skipped to university, and because I'd never studied it before and was surrounded by people who've done the A-level, I was, you know, taking it all in, and I gradually started to think, hang on a minute, I wanted to study the environment. Not much choice to do that. I wanted to study social inequalities. It didn't really pop up. We took income distribution as given, and I was like, but isn't that the point that we're going to talk about? And I gradually realized that the foundational concepts that I was being taught really were not going to serve the world that I wanted to help create. So I walked away from academic economics, actually, after doing a master's. I didn't want to stay on and do a PhD. I realized I didn't want to say, hello, I'm an economist. Have you tried that? Hello, I'm an economist. But I'll just go and get a second drink, sorry. You know, it often doesn't go down that well. So I immersed myself in the real world, as Deb's just talked about. I worked in the villages of Zanzibar. I worked on the Human Development Report, reframing development from economic development to human development. I worked at Oxfam for a decade. I became a mother. I had twins, so I was immersed for a year in knee-deep in nappies and babies, and really understood gender and childcare like in a way that I never did when it was theoretical. And I sat there on the sofa with my babies and watched the world financial crisis melt things down. And I remember seeing the economists come out and saying, we need to rewrite economics so that it reflects financial realities. And I just thought, I'll be damned if we're only going to rewrite economics for that. Is that it? I want to be part of the team that actually makes economics relevant for all the social and ecological and economic issues that we are facing today. So that's what I did. So I went back to the textbooks that I'd never seen. I went to the concepts in the schools of economic thought I'd never been taught, and I found treasure. So I want to start, let's start like this. Just raise your hand right now if you've ever studied economics of any form at school or university. Okay, there's lots of us here. And raise your hand if you've never studied economics, you're wondering what on earth you're doing in a lecture with economics in the title. Okay, so don't worry, because whether or not you studied economics, economics has studied you. The language of economics is in every journalist's question to a minister. It's in the newspapers, it's in the headlines of how we're told what's happening in the world, whether our economy is doing well or not. We swim in the language of economics. So I'm just going to show in one slide 3 concepts that I think are really foundational to the economic mindset that I was taught and actually is still incredibly influential today. And they're going to be pictures, because I think pictures are really powerful, way more powerful than many economists realize. When I was taught, it was as if the equations of primary, the text is a sort of explanation, and the pictures are just an illustration. But actually, many years down the line, the only thing that people remember are the pictures, because they go in through your eyes, into your visual cortex, in the back of your head. They literally sit in the back of your head for decades, and you don't realize they're there, but they are shaping what you see and what you leave blank, what you put at the center and what you make peripheral. They shape your worldview. So the pictures we draw really matter. And I'm going to show you 3 pictures that I think sum up the 20th century economic mindset that I was taught, and I don't want in my head anymore. So the starting point, let me test this, right? For those of you who put your hand up that you ever studied economics, what is the first diagram that you ever remember being taught? Oh, listen to that. Do you think I prepped that? No, folks. That just came out naturally. You can ask that to lecture theatres around the world, supply and demand. So what's going on? Economics means the art of household management, ecosnomos. Would you like to help manage this household? That is an extraordinary offer. Okay, we're going to manage the household. Here's the market. That's a weird thing to immediately do. You don't have to immediately go, here's the market. There's a lot you could talk about. What is the household? How does the household work? Who's in the household? What are their needs? No, here's the market. We go on day 1. I think that's a very political move, whether it's conscious or not. It focuses our mind on the market as a means. It focuses our mind on price. So suddenly everything that wants to be part of the economic conversation, well, it needs a price. So you need to give it a price. Why? Is that the only metric we can make credible and legitimate in economics? And anything that gets left outside the price contract gets called an externality. I'm going to come back to that. The self-portrait, who do we tell ourselves we are, right? How do we depict ourselves in economics? It's a character called Rational Economic Man, and his picture never gets drawn, but since I realized just how powerful pictures are, I decided to draw him, and he would have to look a bit like this. And he would be a man, he's standing alone, he's got no little kids at his feet, he's independent of other people's judgment, he's got money in his hand, he's got ego in his heart, calculator in his head, nature at his feet. He hates work, he loves luxury. He knows the price of everything, and he can never get enough. And what I just described are the traits that are written into the character of humanity that's placed in the vast majority of macroeconomic models still. That's not only absurdly narrow. The real story here is just what that does to us, because researchers have found that the more that students are told that he is like us, actually from year 1 to year 2 to year 3 of their studies, students start to become like him. They more value self-interest over altruism. They more value competition over collaboration. So who we tell ourselves we are shapes who we become. The models we make of ourselves remake us. And that's a really important point for any academic discipline that claims to tell us who we are, because it's literally remaking us. If we carry on telling ourselves that we're like this, 8 to 10 billion people on this planet, I don't think we have a chance of thriving and living well together. We need a new portrait of humanity. And then there's the goal. What's the goal? We never actually actively, openly discussed this, and I certainly never saw the picture on the page, but it sat underneath every politician's speech and every economist's advice. And it is, of course, growth. Endlessly. Up through the ceiling. We don't ask quite where it goes, but it doesn't stop there. It keeps going up. Compounding, year on year. And this is in every country, right? We're here in Scotland right now. I've just been in Amsterdam, I've been in Copenhagen, I've been in Sweden, so I've just traveled through 4 of the actually richest countries in the history of humanity. I know there's deprivation, and I know there's huge inequality, but on the grand scheme of things, if you looked at our countries against all the rest of the world and all through history, these are some of the richest countries that have ever been. And yet our politicians and their economic advisors will tend to say we need yet more growth if we're going to solve any of our problems. Now, Gary just came up here and told us that Scotland is taking a new turn, so I'm not dragging you in here, Scotland. I'm talking about a bigger story. But let's hope that Scotland can actually show there's a different way of doing this. It doesn't have to be that goal. So these 3 diagrams, I think, have a huge role in the foundational mindset that students are still being taught. You know, it's the 1st of October. Students, I know you're in the house. It's the 1st of October. The students all over the world have gone to university, fresh-faced like me. I want to learn economics. Too often, this is still what they're encountering. They tell me, I read your book and I wanted to study, oh, I'm being taught this. I thought I would be taught something more modern. No. The syllabus is very resilient. I really wanted to work on the environment, so I said, where's the living world? Like, how can I make visible the living world? Well, this is one of the major diagrams that we use to kind of show the macroeconomy. I'm not going to go into the details of it. It's got the market, and then you've got banks and governments and trade. If I want to make it, by the way, that's a kind of self-contained sort of perpetual motion machine economy. Where's all the inputs of materials and all the waste and pollution? Where's the energy coming from? It's not there. If I want to show the living world in that picture, economists might say to me, well, think of land, it's a type of capital. You've got land, labor, and capital. It's a kind of capital. Or now we might call it natural capital. So it's inside. The living world is inside the economy. It's a kind of capital. Is that going to work? Or we come over to that supply and demand picture. By the way, this is the most technical thing in it. This is kind of geeky economics, right? It's shifting curves. The difference between a private cost of buying a car and the social cost, which is all the pollution that's coming out the back in the cyclist's face behind you. How do we show that pollution? Well, we draw this little red wedge and we say that's an environmental externality. So when I was studying economics, if I wanted to make the living world and damage to the living world visible, it was like this. I'm only half joking when I say that if aliens wanted to take us down, they don't actually need to land here, they don't need laser guns or anything. All they need to do is convince us that this is a good way to make the planet visible in economics. Because if we use this, we're going to take ourselves down. I think we absolutely have no chance of respecting, protecting, recognizing, and restoring the living world if we keep framing her like this in economics. So this was what motivated me to be part of rewriting economics. And I think these frameworks underpin many of the crises we've seen. They've been used to justify growth first, expansion. And we've lived through so many crises this century already, from the global financial crisis in 2007 and 8, COVID, climate and ecological breakdown, and we're seeing protest crackdown and military crackdown upon protesters who stand for the living world. Now, these crises are reported differently, separately in the news, but they're really interlinked. They all show us how utterly dependent upon each other we are and on the rest of the living world. They show us that crises hit people with vast inequalities of wealth and power, gender and race, the global north and the global south. But they all arise from systems based upon endless expansion, whether it's a financial boom and a bust, whether it's humans moving into wildlife areas and endless global travel, welcome to zoonotic disease transfer, whether it's endless use of fossil fuels and mining, we're going to get climate and ecological breakdown. Oh, you're thinking of a few crises that aren't here? Yeah, this only went up to the end of 2024. This year, I mean, we're now seeing the rise of a far right. We're seeing the rise of authoritarianism. We're seeing a return of militarism. We've seen a genocide in Gaza. So these crises are so surrounding us, and I believe they all, if you go to the root of them, it's an endless expansionism, a mindset that sits within. So I'm going to turn to one of the big men of 20th century economics, and no, it's not going to be Adam Smith for a change. Just because an English woman's come to Edinburgh, she's not going to talk about Adam Smith to you. Give you a break from that. John Maynard Keynes. And Keynes said, and I love this quote, economics is the science of thinking in terms of models, joined to the art of choosing models that are relevant for the contemporary world. Think of that. Is it time for that science of modeling, or is it time for the art of choosing? If Keynes were alive today, and he said this almost 100 years ago, if Keynes were alive today, I think he would say, people, what are you doing? I made up my models, and the ones that you're still drawing on, in a completely different era. We'd not heard of climate change. We didn't know about planetary boundaries. The world was nothing like as globalized as what you have. If I were here on your team today, the first thing I'd do, push aside the models I've been using, I'd start again, I'd draw the reality that you face. Start with now. So I took that inspiration, and that's what I put at the heart of Doughnut Economics. And when I read all the economic theories that I'd never been taught, ecological economics, wow, why didn't they tell me about this? Feminist economics, complexity economics, institutional economics. I wanted to bring them together and make them dance on the same page, and to say, what if they're not just deviations from the orthodox? Oh, there's, you could relax this assumption and relax that. No, I don't want to do that. I want to take away the old stuff and bring them together and present something new. Sometimes the best form of protest is to present something new. And that's why I wrote Doughnut Economics, 7 ways to think. So I set out these old ways, and I set out 7 new ways, always with a diagram and always with a concise phrase, so that it's memorable, the eyes are going to see it. I think of the old economics like intellectual graffiti. It's really hard to scrub out. Much easier to paint a new mural over the top. So rather than try and scrub this old stuff out, Doughnut Economics is a proposition of a new kind of economic mural. And I'm going to just share with you some of these ways tonight. So the first one, it's the goal, right? It's the number one, change the goal. It's not endless growth. What kind of goal is that? Nobody gets up in the morning for endless growth. This offers you, and think of humanity's resource use radiating out from the center of that circle. So the goal here is to leave no one in the hole in the middle falling short in the essentials of life. Leave nobody without the food and water and healthcare, education and housing and transport and energy and voice and income that every person has a claim to. And I can say that because these are drawn from the Sustainable Development Goals. So all the governments in the world have already agreed that every person in the world has a right not to live in that hole. But as we collectively seek to meet these needs, and then we add on to that our wants, our oh so many wants, we risk not only getting everybody out of the hole into the green ring, but we risk going over that ecological ceiling, where we put so much pressure on the life-supporting systems of planet Earth that we begin to kick them out of balance. We bring about climate breakdown, biodiversity loss. We acidify the oceans. We create a hole in the ozone layer. We drain lakes and rivers and break and disrupt the hydrological cycle. So these are the 9 planetary boundaries first recognized in 2009 by Earth system science, and that science has been deepened and tested and improved over time. Now, this is a very proud moment for me because you might not have noticed, but this is new. In fact, this picture was published 2 hours ago. Yeah, you're the first people to see it. Yeah. The donut is actually now 13 years old. It's a teenager. We're into those volatile, disruptive, transformative times. Let's see what happens. But it's just literally, at 4 o'clock today, been published in Nature, which is a pretty cool, yeah, thank you. So we've updated it, and we're going to update it year on year on year. So that's the goal, to meet the needs of all people within the means of the living planet. Leave no one in the hole, and don't overshoot Earth's limits. And I invite anyone to say, oh, I don't agree with that goal. Like, so what's not to like about meeting human rights? Like, you know, we can discuss it, but most people go, well, that makes sense. What about, shall we live within the life support systems that make this planet work? This unique and delicately balanced, only known living planet in the world. Shall we, like, try and live within the means of that planet? That might be a good idea. So most people say, well, this just makes sense. And if this just makes sense, shall we set it as our goal? And it deeply changes the shape of progress. The shape that underlies our conversations is no longer this. The shape is this. Do that with your hands. Let me see you. Oh, yes. Oh, you look lovely. Yeah, right? But we know this in our bodies. This is really, really deeply familiar to us. It's called health. You know in your body, have enough food, but not too much. Have enough water, have enough wine, whiskey, but not too much. Get enough sleep, but not too much. Be warm enough, but not too hot. Be cold, but not too cold. Get enough exercise, but don't overdo it. We survive and live because we live in a zone of balance. Health is balance. Homeostasis, the body's very clever. We're all the same temperature. It's amazing. So it's balance that keeps us alive. There's nothing in your body that tries to grow endlessly that is good for you. We call it cancer when it shows up, and we do everything we can to stop it and intervene, because we understand that delicately balanced things, when some part of it says, I'm going to grow forever, that is not good for the health of the whole. So why would we think that our economies were going to be the one system that bucked that trend? For me, health is the greatest metaphorical opportunity we have to learn to live again on this planet. Can we take what we deeply know in our bodies about human health and take that to planetary health? This is the opportunity, and we really need it. So when I first drew this in 2012, I was really blown away by the traction it had. I'd kind of had it as a sketch in the bottom drawer of my desk for a while, but when we published it as an Oxfam discussion paper, it went viral. People started saying, oh, are you the donut lady? And I thought, what have I done? And I asked myself, why was this gaining so much traction? It's just a picture. If I took all the words in that picture and wrote them in a list, nobody would really blink. So why? What is it about pictures? And I thought, well, how have other cultures visualized well-being and health and thriving? And I started looking at the symbols from across the world. I was just blown away that time and again, these different cultures had this sort of dynamic circle. Whether it's the Turtle Island medicine wheel, the Celtic double spiral, the Buddhist endless knot, the Maori takarangi, the Indian Dharma wheel, the yin-yang, Taoist yin-yang, the Zen enso. And so I realized actually the donut is tapping into, in a much more kind of clunky Western way than the beautiful artistry of these. It's tapping into something that these other cultures have known for millennia. And then when we look at it in relation to the typical Western vision, shape of progress, it's quite a bizarre outlier. So now I think of the donut as a possible bridge between these worlds. Can those of us raised on the idea that shape of progress is endless growth, can we use the donut as a bridge to get back to a kind of wisdom that's actually been long known in other cultures? And people often in these cultures say, I use the donut as a means to talk to this culture because that doesn't make sense to me, but the donut actually is the closest I can get. So it's being used by people to cross over that bridge in both directions, which is, of course, a very big honor. So if that balance is the goal, here's the problem. We are way out of balance, and you're the first people to see this picture. This is brand new, 2 hours old, right? But I'm sorry, because it's not a happy picture, is it? It's getting redder, especially the ecological overshoot. Billions of people are still falling short on life's essentials, on food, right? There's 1 or 2 metrics on each of those. You can see billions of people. The more red that goes to the center, that's the bigger proportion of the world's population who don't have that need met. But we are in massive overshoot of many, now 7 of the 9 planetary boundaries. John Maynard Keynes never saw this. He'd say, why would you think my theories would solve this? Adam Smith didn't see this. Why are you still quoting me? If I was here, I would start with this. We see this in the headlines every day, right? On climate. plastics in our bodies. Wildlife population down 73% since the year I was born, 1970. Kids around the world breathing toxic air, ocean acidification, phosphorus pollution, water shortages, land degradation. And the richest 1% of people own half of the world's wealth. I can't actually get my head into that. Richest 1% of people own half of the world's wealth. And these headlines, of course, you see them every day, right? If you're over 50, you might do this and turn the newspaper. If you're under 50, you'll be scrolling. But you're seeing these headlines every day. And do you ever get that feeling of, oh, where was that hurricane? No, where were the wildfires just now? Was that Sydney or was that, no, who just had climate flooding? It's just happening. It's almost overwhelming to try and keep up with it. Let me give you a nice little piece of good news, headline from NASA. Hole in Earth's ozone layer finally closing up because humans did something about it. That's the point, isn't it? We can do something about all of these. And the question is, will we? And I really believe that with a diagram like this, our children and their children will tug you on the sleeve and say, what did you do once that you knew? Once you saw this, what did you do? How did you change the way you worked, the way you eat, the way you travel, what you think a good holiday is, the way you invest and the way you divest and the way you protest and the way you vote and the way you volunteer? What did you change to help turn this story around? Whoever you are, whatever role you play, they will ask us. I'm showing you a global picture here, but most change doesn't happen at that scale. So let's go down a level. Let's go down to the national level. Now here's just 4 countries across the spectrum, and you can immediately read these. Malawi, massive human shortfall without overshooting any of their share of planetary boundaries. India, double whammy challenge. China, also double whammy challenge. The US, on a massive income per person, still got inequality, and we all can see images of what that inequality actually looks like in the US. Extraordinary tent cities and deprivation, but massive ecological overshoot. And just to be clear, that red that you're seeing, like on the carbon emissions, that's not just carbon that's emitted in the US. That's all of the carbon that's embedded in people's phones and laptops, their clothes, the food that's imported, everything that's imported, so it's a consumption-based footprint. So all of these countries need to transform because none of them are living in the donut. Taking this same idea, here's a scatter plot. There's a wonderful website you can go to with 150 countries, so if a country that you care about or know about isn't here, it's in the website probably. The place that every country wants to be is that top left-hand corner, that little donut up there, because that is where you rise up to meet the needs of all people, but you do it by coming back within the means of the living planet. So first thing that you can see here is there's no country in the donut. There is not any country in the world that is yet meeting the needs of all of its people within the means of the living planet. Country that's closest, Costa Rica. Nearly meeting the needs of its people, almost within the means of the planet. Now that's a really important good news story because it could actually be possible if policies were actually aiming to do that. Here's the 4 countries I just showed you. I don't have a separate donut for Scotland. I'm sure you'll get one day. But right now it's a UK donut, and we're there, amongst the rest of Europe. And I often show this to European countries, governments, and Scandinavians, the Danes, the Swedes, the Norwegians, who kind of, they think, well, we're very sustainable. And there's a kind of jaw-drop moment. What? We're there? I mean, they're doing very well socially, but they're pretty far out on the overshoot of planetary boundaries. All of these countries need to transform. Now, the history of nations and their relationships is embedded in this story. These are not separate dots on the page, right? We're all connected by histories of colonialism. Yes, I must say this because I'm English. It's a big part of the history of the nation I come from. And it's alive today in nations around the world. But military power and corporate power, very alive today as well. I mean, frighteningly alive today. Trade and finance rules, often rigged against the world's poorest countries. Resource extraction, the current and future impacts of climate change. So these countries' histories and futures are deeply interwoven. We move there together, not one at the cost of the other. The history of going for growth generally takes countries in that direction. First towards the donut, but then straight past it. Turning additional income not into thriving for all people, but actually just ecological overshoot. And here you can see actually the little grey lines show you from countries how they actually moved between 1992 and 2015. And even the countries that are closest, sadly, they're not heading into the donut, they're going past it. So let's turn to the words of a woman who deeply inspired me, Donella Meadows, one of the founders of systems thinking, and she was a real growth critic in the 1970s, one of the authors of Limits to Growth. Donella Meadows said, when anyone calls for growth, you can ask them this: growth of what? And why? And for whom? And who pays the cost? And how long can it last? And what's the cost of the planet? And how much is enough? Now you can see she's not against growth. She's just asking you to be really clear about what it is that you want to see grow and who will benefit and are there any side costs and how long do we need that growth until we're there. It's not endless. It's a means and not a goal. So, what if instead of going for growth, we could reorient towards the donut? What if low-income nations could rise up and meet their people's needs without overshooting planetary boundaries like all before them have done? It's unprecedented. What if middle-income countries could meet people's needs while coming back into the planetary boundaries at the same time? It's not been done yet. What if high-income countries like this one, like mine, like all of Europe, like America, Canada, Australia, massive reduction in that very red overshoot, come back within planetary boundaries and finally meet the needs of all our people, because if anyone's got the means to do it, it's for sure the high-income nations. It's not been done. This is all unprecedented journey. So I think it's going to call for a really interesting mix of major ambition and a lot of humility. And there will be learning. The whole kind of we're developed, you're developing hierarchy just falls out the window. There will be learning, and there is already learning, from high-income countries, from actually middle or even low-income countries, of how have they turned this around. We're all on a journey here together. And what's going to make this work? It's going to have to be a major rebalancing between nations. What's that rebalancing look like? Different people bring different priorities. For some, it's reparations. Others say, return the stolen land. Give us back our national land. Redistributing wealth and technology, renegotiating trade and finance rules, redistributing power in international institutions. For me, this has become like a top-level map of the world. So whenever I'm listening to the news or considering policies, whether it's a car-free city or the latest shenanigans in the US, I look at it in terms of, is that going to help bring us closer or drive us further away from this goal? But the question I keep coming back to is, if you wanted to give today's students, if you're a student, if you're an economics student at school or university today, would you just raise your hand? Oh, is there none of you? There's a couple of students here. I'm really glad you're here. If you're a student today, they're all studying, you see, they're all in the textbooks trying to say, what is this? If you're a student here today, learning economics now, in October 2025, what mindset would we wish to give them that would actually give them even half a chance of turning this story around? That was the question that gripped me. What would I want them to be learning? Because it's not those diagrams I showed you. So I'm going to show you some of the diagrams from Doughnut Economics that I say, this is what I teach. When I teach students, they're like, these, I think, are the foundational concepts that will actually equip you with the realities of the world. So we're not going to start with supply and demand. I start with the embedded economy diagram. Once we've got the goal, of course, we've got the goal of the donut. This becomes like the map. So what's going on here? It draws together ecological economics, feminist economics, and commons theory. So the idea here is the economy is a subset of society. It is a social construct. It's entirely invented by humans, which is great news because we can reinvent it. And society is a subset of the living world. We are part of nature dependent upon within the web of life. We're drawing in material and matter. We're putting out waste and pollution. We're bathed in this incredible river of solar energy. And we'd be crazy not to use it. So we need economies that actually work with and within the cycles of the living world. Don't draw more than Earth can generate in a year. Don't put out waste more than she can assimilate. Use solar energy and don't live off that stored energy because you are kicking way too much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and disrupting the balance. But then let's go within the economy. Yes, there is a market. We can now talk about, yeah, there's a market. And it has ways of working. Markets are brilliant. Adam Smith was right. Incredible way of coordinating the needs and wants of billions of people who never even need to meet, but the price mechanism sends the information. A couple of caveats. Markets only serve those who can pay and the rest they ignore. Markets only value what's priced and the rest they consume. So those are major caveats. I don't think anybody would want to live in a society that had the market alone, and that's why we often bring in the state to provide the public goods and also to regulate the whole. And I think so much of 20th century economics, Keynes versus Friedman, was such an ideological boxing match between these two, market and state. You were laissez-faire free market capitalist, you're state-loving socialist, choose. And that boxing match made us completely lose sight of two other fundamental ways that we meet our needs and wants every day. We start in the household, where you got up this morning, where you will go to bed tonight, with our kids, with our parents, who we care for, who care for us. And that's the place of all the cooking and the washing and the cleaning and the sweeping and the raising the kids and doing it all together, all again tomorrow, getting labor fresh and ready for work. Who shows up and works in the market and the state? Who looked after them while they were ill? Who washed their clothes? Who potty trained the children? This is all unpaid caring work that happens in the house, traditionally, typically the work of women. It's essential to the economy, and it's the place that makes life work. But also the commons, where we come together, not through market and state, but as a community, under an agreed set of rules. And we produce things that we collectively value, like Wikipedia, like a community garden, like a stable climate. So I wouldn't want to live in a society whose economy lacked any one of these four forms of provisioning, because I think they all have unique attributes, but none of them can do it alone. And we need a real rebalancing of the relationship between them, because the market is so powerful, it's often rolled back the state and squeezed the household and privatized the commons. And we need to rebalance that. So here is the embedded economy that gives us a starting point. And finance, it should be a flow in service of the real economy, in service of thriving. But I think we've seen a financial system that actually has become far much more in service of itself. How does that get redesigned in service? Financial services, it's a great idea. So if that's the starting point, I think there are two major dynamics that we should be paying attention to, and it's not growth. The first one is to recognize that we've inherited economies that tend to be linear and degenerative by design. It's the take, make, use, and lose. Throwaway culture. And that is what pushes us over planetary boundaries. We take and take and take from Earth's sources like the forests and the fish, and we throw our waste into Earth's sinks and spew it in the atmosphere and into the soil and leach it into the lakes. This literally eats the sources of life. We have to bend those arrows around and create an economy that's regenerative by design, separating out biological and synthetic materials, and using them again and again and again, far more carefully, creatively, and slowly, so that we create a circular economy that regenerates and restores the living world. And I bet you can think of many examples of circularity that are already happening, and circularity that's urgently needed and still not yet happening. So from a degenerative to a regenerative economy, that for me I think is one of the major dynamics that determines whether or not we actually learn to live again as part of this planet. But it's only one half of the story. The other one is that we've inherited economies that tend to be really divisive by design often, capturing value and opportunity in the hands of a few, whether it's through the coding of capital, whether it's through privilege, regulation, infrastructure, or the network effect that we're seeing so supercharges the gathering of resource and power in a few hands. No chance of humanity thriving in the donut with such unequal economies. The richest 1% own half of the world's wealth. No chance. We have to create economies that are far more distributive by design, and that means sharing value and opportunity with everybody who co-creates it, and that tends to turn out to be the whole of society. And why just stick with redistributing? Can we pre-distribute? Can we ask who owns the sources of wealth? Who owns the land? And who owns the housing? Who owns the utilities? Who owns the businesses? Can they be owned in far more equitable ways so that everybody is part of this wealth generation and a beneficiary of it? I was in a workshop this afternoon with communities from across Scotland talking about the value of having a wind turbine that's owned by the community, and that is bringing like £100,000 into the community every year. That's an example of who owns the utilities, who owns the power to generate power. Far more distributive by design, changes many things. So we need to go from degenerative to regenerative economics, but also from divisive to distributive economies. So I've taken you on a whirlwind tour, come a long way from here, right? This is the 20th century mindset that I want to leave behind. It actually angers me when I find out that today's students have gone to university and often taken out a loan and they're paying for their accommodation. They show up and if they're being taught this. This does not equip them for the future. They're going to be the economists, the politicians, the journalists, the lawyers, the doctors, the community leaders, the activists of 2050. What ideas are actually going to empower them to do that well? It's not this. I think these ideas, and many more that we still need to gather and create, give them a far, far stronger starting point. So that's a conceptual overview, and that's what I really aim to set out in the book, and my goal was to go to the universities and say, this should be the economics paradigm. This should be the curriculum. That was what I wanted to make happen. It's probably the place I've most failed, because economics departments are like, thank you, no thank you. We are very happy with what we're doing. It's been picked up in many, many other places. Business studies, absolutely, because business happens in the real world, and we're exposed to floods and droughts and supply chain challenges and regulation of chemicals, so we need this. It's picked up in urban studies, in architecture, in medicine, in civil engineering, in law. So it's been picked up in many other disciplines, but not the place that I hoped to get it. But here's what actually happened that really thrilled me. When my book came out in 2017, I started getting contacted by people, sometimes at a book talk, sometimes on Twitter, when it was still Twitter. And they'd say, oh, I'm teaching this. This is in Amsterdam. Oh yeah, we teach the kids on Fridays. We do Doughnut Friday. Don't worry, they're vegan, healthy donuts. They made them themselves. And we give all the kids a donut, and then we draw it on the board, and we're going to talk about energy this week. And they send the kids out into the neighborhood and go and find out about all the different ways that people use energy and how is energy generated here. And I think, I want to be in that class. Amazing, pioneering teachers taking this idea. Of course, these kids can understand it. And I started thinking, wouldn't it be brilliant to write down what they're doing and have a way of sharing that online so that other teachers around the world could say, oh, I'm going to do that. And I started getting contact by people saying, oh, I've taken the donut and I've actually applied it to my locality or my town or my city. They started generating all these amazing new pictures, sometimes by municipal governments, getting in touch saying, we want to do that in our town council. Could we do that here, or our city? And we had to think, how would you do that? We need to create a tool that would enable you to do that. And how have you done it? Because I don't know how to do it. I'm not a town councillor. You know how to do it much better than me. What have you done? How can we share that with other people? Or community groups? We're using this in our neighborhood. We're mobilizing now. Actually, this reflects what we've been doing for decades. We just didn't have a name for it. We didn't have a picture for it. This really helps make sense of what we do. Or a business. Oh, we love the donut. It's like a logo of our company. How can we make sure that our business is acting as a vehicle to help bring people into the donut rather than what a lot of 20th century business did, which is make a lot of profit by pushing us out of it on both sides. So people wanted to put it into practice, and I realized I need to set up an organization to actually help these pioneers connect, find each other, learn from each other, and amplify this. And so I co-founded Doughnut Economics Action Lab, and the clue is in the name. It's all about action. We work with people who are doing it. It's not about generating more theory. It's about working with people who get in touch and say, yeah, we're trying it here. We want to get started. How do we get started? And it's a lab because changing the future is one big experiment, and we don't know how it's going to work. So I'm going to take you down into a story about local government, municipal government around the world, whether it's a city or a village or a town, how they've been using it, and also community groups. So it's about places, saying we want to do that here. It began in 2020. The city of Amsterdam said, we want to be the first. You know, they're one of those places like, we want to be the first. So we're going to be the first. We want to put the donut at the heart of our circularity strategy, which we're launching. Really ambitious. We're going to be 100% circular by 2050. We're going to be 50% circular by 2030. By 2030, there's going to be no fossil fuel cars or boats in our city, or trucks or anything. No fossil fuel vehicles in the city. Really ambitious. And they put the donut as the symbol. Nice Dutch orange donut there. 6 weeks later, and this was the first clue of how change happens, 6 weeks later, the City Council of Copenhagen, we're also a cool European city, we don't want to get left behind here, they voted, we're going to explore, with a massive majority, we're going to explore what it would mean to do the donut here. Then, Brussels and Barcelona, and I literally thought, is this going to be alphabetical? But no. They broke out, and now there's over 50 towns and cities around the world that have publicly put the donut at the heart of their strategies, their vision, their processes. And I'm going to show you a few of them. So first of all, there was Amsterdam, Dutch orange donut. They put it at the heart of their circular housing, circular textiles, circular food. And a community got together and we said, the Amsterdam Donut Coalition, we're going to do donut deal days. If you've got a community project that's tackling 3 social issues and 2 environmental issues, it's a donut deal, and let's shake on it. Amazing, amazing pioneering stuff. Barcelona, we're going to look at the city through the lens of the donut, and we're going to publish it. And I say kudos to any local government that publishes a diagram like that, because that's not pretty information. That's where we're failing people. That's where we're overshooting the planet. This is like hanging out your dirty laundry in public. So kudos to any government that publishes it, because it's half the issue of like, this is what we have to change, not what we can show off and say, look what we've done. This is what we haven't done. This is what we have to do. And they're using it to bring about a cultural sustainability in a city that's already incredibly ambitious about taking out cars, putting back trees, bringing back community, restoring community and ecology in the center of a very busy city. In Grenoble in France, they've been really playful, as you can see with their report. In 2022, they said by the year 2040, so a kid born today, by the time they're 18, they should be in a city that's well on its way to living in the donut, and they do a lot of community mobilization. There's amazing stuff happening here in Scotland, in Glasgow. Amazing. City council working together with the university, doing pioneering work, bringing it into the heart of the policies, looking at how all the strategies relate. I'm going to take you to Cornwall. They've turned it into a decision-making wheel. Any infrastructural project that they're going to spend money on goes through this wheel. How does it affect social issues? How does it affect the environment? This is their annual indicator. I don't even need to explain to you what's going on here. You can see what's getting worse, what's getting better, what hasn't changed. And imagine if I said to you, Cornwall's GDP has gone up by 1.3%. Was that because they hired more teachers for the primary schools, or because there was an oil spill they had to clear up? Doesn't tell you anything. This tells you in human and planetary terms what's actually happening. These are the metrics of life, and much more communicable to the community. EPO, they're one of the places, they want to go first. EPO, we want to be the first city in Asia. So they're now doing it, and this is the first place we're doing it in a middle-income country. What does that mean? How do we change it? They've done a very cute thing in EPO. Whenever they take formal photographs together, they do this. They've invented this donut symbol, so you get lots of pictures of the Malaysian governments. So everybody's innovating and making their own thing. It's like a meme that travels. And in Bhutan, the government of Bhutan said, Doughnut Economics, it's really actually quite similar to our concept of gross national happiness, so we want to use them together to imagine a thriving Bhutan in 2047. And they put it at the heart of the city Grand Master Plan. So if you're interested in any of those ideas, my colleague Leonora, who's our Cities and Regions lead, she's done a brilliant report that documents all the different ways that cities and regions are getting started. And that's the point. We don't tell them, oh, you should do this. I'm not a city councillor. I don't know. I don't know the politics and the inside experience. So we learn from them. There's also community groups all around the world that have just spontaneously formed and said, we want to start making this happen here. A bit like transition towns some years ago. And they pop up and they make all these lovely different emblems, and that's a lovely illustration of adapting it to place and making it work for them. And the really great thing about community groups is they just play with it. You get donut-shaped pizzas, you get people writing their own newspapers, you get donut dancers, really playful. Again, making it accessible to anybody, because a lot of people are afraid of economics. If you try saying to somebody, I'm an economist, often people say, I don't do maths. And I said, well, look, in my book, the only numbers are the page numbers, you'll be okay. But if you say Doughnut Economics, no one's afraid of donuts. You might hate them or love them, but you're not afraid of them. And when you say Doughnut Economics, people are that's playful. I can come and play. I'm invited here. I can bring my creativity and a bit of humor. And that's what makes it work. So it's been used, the Irish Doughnut Economics Network across Ireland got together and they connecting up different communities. How can we bring these ideas into local government, but also into community life? It's been used in Melbourne. They had wildfires that just destroyed so much of the city. Then they had COVID, then they had wildfires. And it's often when a place goes into crisis, they say, we've got to invent a new way. And they turn to the donut. Their goal is a swimmable Yarra River at the heart of the city. It's a vision symbolizing thriving. A city very near where I live, Birmingham, doing amazing stuff, a group called Civic Square, doing amazing stuff at the scale of a street, at the scale of a neighborhood. Can we bring a regenerative, distributive future here? And not just neighborhoods and towns, but Lausanne, the University of Lausanne, said, we're going to use the donut to transform our own university. I mean, they kind of had to, right? See the building. It was kind of, you know, the clue is in the shape. So lots of different organizations have started using it. So I'm telling you, look, it's happening, but come on, let's get honest. What happens when we get stuck? because you get stuck. You're trying to transform the future, and you're facing budgets and regulations and policies and inertia. You're facing burnout and the financial system. There's all these barriers to making change happen. It's never straightforward. The pioneers who do this work, they're the really determined people. It's the kind of thing like, I don't know how we're going to get there. I'm just going to try and make it happen because I'm determined. So you get to work with amazing people because that's who shows up. So I want to just share with you a few quotes to finish of that inspiration of how do we keep going, because these times are not easy. They're getting harder, especially at the global scale. It's pretty overwhelming what's rising, and we need people to stand and say, I'm for this. So let's start by knowing that people have been here before, trying to change the paradigm and thinking it's really hard. Yeah, what happens when journalists say, they call up, where's a place already living in the donut? Yeah, I want to go there. It's like, they've only just started, give them a break. Show me what you've done. So show me some actual results. And how do you know this is going to work? How do you know that this failing, we know this failing kind of economic system. How do you prove to me this is going to work? And why is it taking so long? These are the kinds of questions we get. So, people have been here before. In 1947, Milton Friedman was there. He got together with his friends like Friedrich Hayek, and they said, we want to bring out a new economic paradigm. We're going to call it neoliberalism. It was a dream. And Friedman said this, only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. And when that crisis occurs, people turn to the ideas that are lying around. That, I believe, is our basic function, to develop alternatives to existing policies, to keep them alive and available until the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. The two most fascinating words there are politically impossible. In 1947, Milton Friedman thought neoliberalism was politically impossible. Well, it took 33 years, but he won. When Reagan and Thatcher were elected in 1980, he won. But imagine if a journalist had called him up 6 years in, like 1953, Milton, how's neoliberalism going? It looks like it's dead in the water. It takes time, but we can't take 33 years. They had massive corporate money behind them, think tanks that exist today, like the Heritage Foundation, that wrote much of the policy that Donald Trump is pursuing now. Many people trying to do this work don't have that behind us, but instead we have a solidarity and a conviction. What if we didn't leave those ideas just lying around? What if we had them up and running? And that's why we work with any pioneers who come to us. We want to be able to point during times of crisis, look, there are policymakers quite like yourself already doing this. They chose it themselves. Nobody paid them. Nobody lobbied them. They said, this makes sense. They're on it. Howard Zinn, he said, the leaps that man has made in social evolution come from those who acted as if they knew they would win, as if they'd actually already won. Think of the suffragettes. We're not here to break the laws. We're here to make the laws. Carried off by the police, but the look on their face is like, we're going to be the ones who turn out to be right, actually. Gandhi, the British will leave India. I will hold my dignity high. You will leave. And he was right. These young men sitting at a counter knowing that they would be probably beaten and jailed because their skin was the wrong color. As Martin Luther King said, the arc of history bends towards justice. We will be right. So how do we hold ourselves as if we believe that this will be right, that we will actually learn not to endlessly grow but to thrive? Shirley Chisholm, first black woman to be elected to the US Congress, so she knows a thing or two about exclusion. She said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. So how can you bring a folding chair? Hold your own festival, write your own newspaper, make your own podcast, make it the better party, make it irresistible. People are like, I actually want to be part of that. It's a lot more fun. And lastly, Ilya Prigozhin, Nobel laureate in chemistry. Great quote. When a complex system far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to shift the entire system to a higher order. So we need to join up those small islands. Where are they? All the councils, all the communities, all the teachers. That's why we exist, to join up the small islands, because we are always so encouraged by meeting others like ourselves, trying to do that thing that looks impossible, but there's you, and here's me, and we're trying. And who knows where we'll make this system change? Who knows? But there's momentum here, so let's keep following it. That's what inspires me to keep going and keep going on this work, because the amazing people who show up with a determination to make change happen. So if this sounds at all interesting to you, I warmly invite you to our community platform. It's at doughunuteconomics.org. where you can browse, you can have a look, you can become a member, you can find out who else is here around you. Do you want to make something happen? You can use all the tools I've described. They're in the Commons, because this, we believe, is the best way to make these ideas spread and scale at the speed that these times demand, and my goodness, do they demand it. So I offer you a donut. The best ones are conceptual. Enjoy. Thank you very much indeed.
So thank you so much, Kate, for such an engaging and compelling lecture. The purpose of the TB Macaulay Lecture is to encourage and provoke discussion and to change the ways that we think. And I think you've certainly gone about starting that journey for us. What, for me, I find so extraordinary about the donut is the movement that it's inspired. But I think after hearing from you, I understand why that's happened. Now, we've been thinking a lot and talking a lot at the Institute about how to make sure our science has more impact, because we know we face some quite urgent challenges, and one of our core values actually is to make a difference. I think the Doughnut Economics Action Lab is amazing in that respect. It shows the value of sharing, it shows the value of collaboration, it shows the value of mutual learning, and I think these are all real principles we can learn from as an institute, so thank you for that. So I'm now going to move to the question and answer stage of the evening. I'm going to go and sit over here. Now, those of you that have been to these lectures before will know that we've tried all sorts of formats at this point. We've tried panel discussions, we've tried Slido questions. What we're going to do tonight, though, is just go old school and ask you to raise your hand, please, and we'll move. We've got a number of microphones. I can't actually see. This is going to be a slight problem because I can't actually see the mics or where they are or any hands, but I'll look out.
Oh, house lights, there we are.
Oh, excellent. And so please do ask your questions. I'm going to try and be equal in terms of space and ask them all over. So please raise your hand and wave. While we're just waiting for you to come forward, I'm beginning to see some hands. Great. We are streaming this live to some Hutton colleagues, or hopefully a lot of Hutton colleagues, who haven't made it down to Edinburgh tonight. And I did ask for questions in advance, and I did get one.
Oh, okay.
So we'll start off with this. So hello, everybody out there from Hutton. This question is from Simone, who's an economist, and who I know has been looking at different alternative economic approaches that have been put forward for addressing some of the global challenges like biodiversity crisis and the climate crisis. Now, Simone's question is, what do you see as the main barriers to doughnut economics being adopted by policymakers at the national level? Are they ideological, institutional, or social, or what do you think?
My personal view is that the major barrier to national policymakers adopting it rather than local government is that we have economies that are structurally dependent on endless growth. It's been written into the design of our economies, and I think it's there because we've had 100 years of cheap energy through fossil fuels. So fossil fuels just give you such cheap energy that it's quite easy to keep the economy growing just if you use more and more of it. And so you're on this rising escalator. And if we live our entire lives on a rising escalator, we're just going to think, well, of course the escalator always goes up. So we can design for our pensions, put away a little bit of money now, and don't worry, when you get off the escalator, there'll be lots. That's quite a weird thing to expect. I mean, a squirrel does not gather nuts in the autumn, bury them, and expect to come back in January and find 15% more nuts. But we do. Money actually has a weird design. It's the only thing that we design and expect it to increase over time. In life, things rot, they decay, but we've designed finance with the expectation of growth. And so our governments save for pension, right? That's how we save for our pensions. That's how we pay off debt, right? Debt bears interest, so you need to grow to pay off the debt. So there are many ways that our economies have been designed with the need for endless growth, no matter how rich we are. And that's why we still talk about growth, growth, growth. And the biggest structural dependence on endless growth, the one that really keeps me awake at night, is the one about geopolitics. So think of all the world's political leaders in that annual G20 family photo. They're all standing there on the carpet at the G20. If any one of those countries said, actually, you know, I've read Doughnut Economics and I realize we should be thriving, not growing, and I think I'm going to just stop my country from growing, well, the rest will keep going. There might be a military takeover in the tone that we have today, but they would probably be ultimately booted out of the G20 because you're not really a powerhouse anymore, and some new ones have come through. So there's a geopolitical collective action problem that everyone keeps growing to keep up with their neighbors who keep growing to pay for the military warfare to keep them out. And that's not an economic problem. That is a question of international relations, of global peace negotiation. So we are trapped in systems. And if a government said, oh, I think we'll stop growing, well, the financial markets, which are in service actually to themselves, they'll say, well, you're not a very good investment anymore, we're out. So I really empathize with national politicians because they have come into a job in a system that demands to be on an ever-rising structural escalator. And that's why I think it's taken off amongst local governments, even though they also want growth. But a locality doesn't become successful because it's grown and grown and grown. It's got to be a good place to live. It's got to be a place where people want to raise their kids and send them to the school and have a nice neighborhood and feel like they belong. So actually, you've got to do something much more closer to the donut to make people choose to live here. And that's my personal view as to why it's taken off more amongst local governments than national.
Okay, thank you. Now I think we've got a question over there. Would you like to? So a change of mind, I think. Oh yeah, just one here, sorry.
I know that you teach something called the economic circus. I was wondering if you could tell us more about what that is and whether it's one of the ways you engage with people working within the mainstream economic system.
So I've been talking about Doughnut Economics for 13 years because it's a teenager, and I started giving talks at festivals, you know, this kind of summer festivals, and everyone's there in a tent. And last year I was at a festival, and I said, I'm going to give a talk, it's going to be cool, we need to talk about growth. And the night before I was talking, I went into where am I going, what's the tent? And it was like a circus tent. I thought, my goodness, I need to deserve this stage. So I did it in a really playful way, cracking jokes, riffing off the audience, being a bit silly, and it was so fun that I decided I'm now going to actually do Doughnut Economics Circus. So I've just done it in Amsterdam and Copenhagen, and I literally dress up. I'm the ringmaster. I've got a red top hat with a donut on it. And this year's circus is called The Battle for the Biosphere, Nature versus Finance. So I come up on the stage and I say, does any member of the audience want to come up and play Mother Nature? And somebody comes up. Man or woman, young or old, they come up, and I dress them up as Mother Nature. Will somebody come up and play the financial system? Somebody comes up. People start pointing at somebody. They work on something, they come up. And so we have a standoff. We play a game show, it's called Who Wants to Be a Million Years Older? Because they say, you're not both going to make it. And then the thing I really love about doing it is I invite people from the audience up to, and we use circus games and tricks as a kind of metaphor for change. And the lovely thing is, in a room of more than about 50 people, actually I'm going to try it here, like if I needed, right now, if we were doing the circus and I say, is there a juggler in the house? Can you put up your hand if you can juggle? Where's the juggler? You see, it's a hand, there's one, you see, there's one, you see, there's always a juggler in the house. And you say, come on up. And they come up and juggle. And they inspire finance to care about more than one thing at a time, see? And you say, can I have a hula hooper? Who wants to come and be a clown? Who can do something really bendy in public? And people come up. And so I love it because the point of it is there are skills and talents hidden amongst us that we didn't know. I don't need to hire any professional acrobats. It's all here already. And there's something very beautiful about the metaphor of that it's all here already. If only we give ourselves a chance to come up and use these skills. And it's really fun and it's silly. And so we can talk about the deep design tensions between nature and finance. Nature is regenerative, finance is accumulative. Nature is relational, finance is reductive. Nature is in it for the infinite gain, keep things going. Finance shuts it down to close the deal. We can talk about those things in a very playful way, but it's a really profound conversation. And I've found that, and I've done it with people who actually work at the heart of finance, and they've come and played this role, and they said, this is actually quite cathartic for me. And we get to deep issues with humor in a way that we often might not get to if we were sort of pussyfooting around or being quite serious about it. So I get a huge kick out of Doughnut Economics Circus. Yeah, if you know, had a lunch with a politician today who said, oh, Edinburgh Festival. So, you know, who knows? Maybe back at the Edinburgh Festival. Keep an eye out.
I think that sounds an excellent idea. So we'll see you next August.
Yes, I'll
if
be here in
not
August,
before.
I hope.
So, gentleman here, thank you.
Yes, I'd looked at your chart called the embedded economy, and
Yes.
you show on the left-hand side solar power coming in. The sun puts enough energy in the earth in 1 hour to power mankind for a whole year. And surely that is why we can have more growth. Because if we keep capturing that energy 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, we can actually feed more people, precision fermentation, novel proteins. We can heat, warm people. We can do so much with that energy. And by saying there's a limit to growth, we treat ourselves like a closed system, rather than saying, actually, we've got that sun 80-odd million miles away, which we can do a lot more with, and we can grow more. Is that not, are we not missing a trick there by saying we can still grow?
Thank you for this view. I really appreciate that. I think we are a closed system, as in a closed system being it's closed to materials, but it's open to energy. Now, Elon Musk and others are trying to change that, right, and say do asteroid mining. And if asteroid mining actually becomes a real thing, then we could no longer say it's a closed system. But until then, the materials stay within the earth, but it's open to energy and heat loss. But your point, you know, yes, there's so much solar energy we've barely tapped into. We could grow more food. We could use precision farming. We could do things so much more smartly. We could use water so much better than sprinkling it, use precision irrigation, for example. But what I heard you saying is we can feed more people. We can get people out of the hole. I mean, before we say let's have global growth, let's focus on getting people out of the hole. And I want to be really clear here. I'm not against growth. I'm for ending human deprivation and living within planetary boundaries. That's, to me, that is what the focus should be on. Low-income countries, I showed places like Malawi, Bangladesh, they need to ensure decent food for all, housing, transport, energy. I have no doubt that in the process of doing that, their GDP will go up. It makes total sense to me. And if ever there's growth in the world, it should be in the places that have massive human deprivation. Other places have so much ecological overshoot that we have a huge responsibility to combat within our share of planetary boundaries. And this is a whole debate in itself. We need to talk about growth. I have seen no evidence of any country that is managing to combine sufficient coming back within planetary boundaries, and not just on carbon emissions, but on material use, and that's the kick. Carbon emissions, there's a little bit of decoupling, but it's nothing close to enough at the speed and scale required. Materials, we have barely begun decoupling from GDP. So go for growth but that's not the goal. The goal is to come back within planetary boundaries. And until we can show we can do that with a growing GDP, I'm deeply agnostic and skeptical that we can do it with growth. So it comes down to how could we do it? Now, somebody could say we've never even tried to do it. Okay, let's try to do it. But I worry that if we say, I worry that too many people have on their job description and on their reports and in their green growth. It's like a concept way ahead of any proof that it's possible. And I worry that we string ourselves to this because we're addicted to growth. So it sounds great, green growth, yes. But actually, we're nowhere close to showing that we can do it, and I worry that we're going to keep galloping through the growth, and when the two come apart, guess which one we'll stick with? It will be the growth, and the green is gone, and we're way over planetary boundaries. So I'm agnostic about growth because it's not the thing I ultimately care about. I care about coming back within planetary boundaries and meeting the needs of all people. It's a whole other circus. It's a deep circus, right? And it's a big topic, so I really appreciate your point. I think it's the existential economic question of the 21st century. What is going to be our future relationship to economic growth?
Thank you. Lots of hands going up now. I'm just going to take one here.
Mike Rivington from the James Hutton Institute. Thanks very much, Kate, for a truly inspiring presentation. A lot of the examples that you gave were of communities of place, but I wonder whether a direction for the Doughnut is to communities of practice.
Ooh.
And here I'm thinking, if you get the world's farmers on board, they would serve as really quite a good medium through which you could then expand the Doughnut, and through which potentially the sort of barriers that you've been talking about might start to dissipate, because our society, our civilization is built on agriculture. So agriculture could potentially become the new foundation, using the Doughnut to address all the issues. So the question really is, how do we go from communities of place to communities of practice? Thank you.
Great question, and I didn't plant it. But the latest report we've released, I showed you one here by my colleague Leonora, which said cities and regions, let's get started. We've just actually a couple of months ago released one called sectors, let's get started. Because people have started coming from, well, I'm not from a place, but I'm from the tourism industry. Could we use this to rethink tourism? Could we use this to rethink fashion? Could we use it to rethink festivals, healthcare, highways, all sorts of different sectors, urban development, building, farming. So people have started using the Doughnut and getting in touch with us and say, we sat around the table and we thought, how can we adapt this to our industry? And they've done it in different ways. And again, we've published a report that says, here's some different ways and here's some guidelines. Please, you know, we have kind of do's and don'ts, like please only put on the inside social issues. Don't put company revenue, for example. It doesn't belong there. This is social issues. On the outside, ecological issues. But bring in other tools so it can exactly be used for that. And for me, this is a really important point. When I first started being contacted by teachers, by civil engineers, by doctors, by lawyers, by people working in fashion, people working in tourism, it's like, you know you're tapping into paradigm change because you've gone up above any particular discipline, and people in very different fields are saying this is useful to me as well in a different way. So I'm really interested in how we can make it a more and more useful tool, and we do that by learning. You know, museums, we want to use the Doughnut for museums. Okay, wow, show us what you're doing, and can we keep improving these tools and then share them back out so that other people in other museums but other sectors will be equally inspired. So there is actually a farmer's Doughnut already. It's one that was made in the Netherlands. It might not be the best, it might not be right yet. This is an iterative process, and we really warmly invite people to pick it up and use it and improve it.
That's great. That's something we'll definitely be looking at. There's a question here, and then I'm realizing I'm taking lots of questions from the front. So, okay, there's one at the back after that. So just thank you, Andrew.
Hi, so thank you very much for a fantastic lecture. And I'm down here at the...
oh, you're there. You can see I'm kind of gazing off at you. Hello, hello.
So you talked about the difficulty in getting engagement from national level politics, and it's obviously really difficult for economies to give up on things that they've been focused on, like economic growth. But adding new things is one way around that, and in the financial system, it's possible to innovate in ways that don't have a directly material cost. So the idea of a carbon coin is one of those innovations at a very large scale, which seems to have, you know, potential to address some of the needs at the same enormous scale as the challenges that we face now. So you've spoken previously about Carbon Coin with Kim Stanley Robinson and Delton Chen, and I wondered what your thoughts were on that now.
So if I can speak not specifically on the carbon coin, but the power of inventing currencies to address this, yes. I'm fascinated by it because I halfway through writing the book, I realized that, you know, the language of economics, we used to talk about laws of economics, the laws of supply and demand, the laws of marginal return. You think, these aren't laws. They're not laws at all. And it's actually economics kind of imitating Newtonian science. These are not laws. Actually, economics is a design. Everything's designed, including currency. And I got really interested in currency, and I was very inspired by a Belgian currency theorist called Bernard Lietaer, who sadly died about 5 years ago. But I learned so much from him, and I'll just tell you right now, everything I learned from Bernard Lietaer. He said, you know, we swim in a monoculture of money. We just think money is money. It's actually a very specific design, and it can be designed in many other ways. And when you meet a complementary currency or a different carbon coin, these different kinds of currencies or cryptocurrencies, they can be made by different people with different characteristics. We realize that there are different ways of designing money. And Bernard used to say there are 4 questions you need to ask about every currency. Who has the power to create it? Could be the government, could be private banks that have been given license to create money on demand for your mortgage. It could be a community that makes a complementary currency. It could be an airline that creates air miles. It's a kind of currency. So who has the power to create that currency? How can you get it? What do you have to do to earn it or outright get hold of it? How can it be used? What can it be spent on? And what character is it given? Does it bear interest? Does it bear demurrage, which means instead of gaining value over time, if you hold it, it loses value over time if you hold it. Post-World War II, governments started issuing currency that would lose value over time because to make people go and spend it. So you can change people's behavior, you can change people's relationships and distribution through the design of money. And so tapping into that is things like, how do we use a new kind of currency to sequester carbon, to reward people for storing water and reforesting? And there's all sorts of new blockchain currencies coming up that are actually starting to see if we can design this. And I was actually doing a circus with people from the finance industry and people from forests and ecology only a couple of weeks ago, saying, can we bring our heads together and design new kinds of currencies to solve these problems? So I'm really have high hopes around it, and I also don't want to be naive. I think it's incredibly difficult to do it well. There aren't that many examples that are super successful yet, so you have to get the design right.
Yes, just one at the back, and then we'll come back to the front here. I promise this gentleman. So.
Thanks. Hi, Clive Mitchell from Nature Scott. Thanks, Kate, for a fabulous talk. I'm interested in the observation that you made about the 1% who own 50% of the wealth, and on your diagram, those on the top right who have to make the journey to the top left. And I wondered if you could say something about managing the power dynamics involved in that transition, given that some people are going to have to give up an awful lot, so more people can have more.
Thanks. No, but really, yeah. Yeah, so in that top right, we had the US, Canada, Australia. 3 countries with interesting shared histories, right? Europeans migrated there, major lands actually took over other people's lands, mining, major fossil. So very interesting shared stories about an expansion and resource-based life. When I first drew the donut diagram, some American colleagues of mine, so I was at Oxfam, and Oxfam America, they said, we don't like this diagram. We don't like this diagram. Because actually we Americans, when we see boundaries, we want to break right through them. It's the American way. And I said, are you sure? Because, you know, if you're holding a baby child and this child has 3 months old, has a temperature of 40 degrees, do you say, you go for it, girl? You do everything you can. Boundaries are health. And actually, boundaries unleash creativity. I really genuinely believe that. Talk to a designer, an architect, they'll say, don't give me a blank piece of paper, give me some parameters. That's what right? Jimi Hendrix on a 6-string guitar, Mozart on a 6-octave piano, Serena Williams, the tram lines make the tennis. Boundaries unleash our creativity. So many of us have been raised, and I think what you were speaking to, in cultures of this idea of freedom. I'm free to have more. And it goes back to that rational economic man, he can never get enough. And the idea that I want more and more and more, and actually in economic circus, I get finance up on the stage, and inside finance has this briefcase with a sort of grand hose for sucking up return, and inside finance's briefcase are 3 black masks, and I take them out and say, oh, these are your deepest emotions. These are the deep emotions driving finance, and I ask the audience, what are they? And the audience name them every time, almost exactly the same 3 things come out very quickly. Greed, fear, and ego or disconnection, which are quite related. So there's something about fear. Fear can be real, and sometimes actually it's a misplaced emotion that, you know, people, I was raised in, I'm not speaking myself, many people would say, I was raised in a house where there was never quite enough. And so I'm going to make sure I've got enough for my kids, and actually I'm going to, right? Fear of the times ahead. It's not hard to understand how people might say, I need more, because I'm afraid. Greed, and I need to, I need to do better than her. I need more, I need status. And I get greed up on stage, and greed is quite frightening, actually, and we try and talk them down. We kind of do therapy in the middle of the circle, try and talk these emotions down. And they're pretty tough to talk down. So how do we create a culture of sufficiency? In Sweden, they have a word, lagom, which means it's plenty and it's enough. It's enough. In English, we can't say enough. It's sufficient. It's a bit mean. I don't know. It doesn't quite... I would love a word in our language that said it's enough. And actually, I don't want more stuff. Is there a generation? There is some young generation that says, I don't want all that clutter. Actually, I want less. As Jason Hickel wrote a book, Less is More. How do we break away from the idea that owning more stuff and more consumption is better? So how do we get those cultures to give stuff up? I really don't know. I really don't know. But I do think that showing images like this that actually say, hey, folks, you're way out there. Don't sell us the American dream. Can you see how way out there? We need a deep re-reckoning. So I think we need to bring in the psychotherapists and the clowns to help this. But I don't know the answer on that. This is a collective problem.
Thanks.
So I'm in awe, Kate, of your empathy for politicians. The difficult job they've got. We've got a crowd in London who are completely obsessed with growth.
Yes.
What sort of mechanisms? Well, I'm thinking of your former employees, the Oxfam. They're looking at, and among others, are looking at wealth tax as a way of nudging, as a way of reframing and helping them refocus on something different. What are some of the tools that could facilitate that reorientation, do you think?
Could facilitate the UK to actually move towards introducing a wealth tax? Ooh.
Oh, no? Not only a wealth tax, towards adopting the Doughnut approach.
The UK government?
Yes.
Well, I had the fortune to meet Keir Starmer about 2 weeks before he became the leader of the Labour Party. I was invited along to this kind of breakfast with a bunch of other economists, and we were talking to him, and I slid a copy of Doughnut Economics across the table. I'm not sure if it made it to number 10, because I don't hear it. I definitely don't hear it in Rachel Reeves saying growth, growth, growth. I mean, I find I listened to the growth conversations through the 2010s when I was writing this book, and you used to have political leaders in, like, all the political leaders used to say things like Obama and Merkel, they used to say, we want clean, green, resilient, strong, better, good growth. There's lots of adjectives. And you think you clearly want something more than growth because you're putting so many adjectives in front. It was actually Donald Trump who was the first politician when he was first elected who came along and just said, I want growth. 3 to 5, maybe 6%. He was harking back actually to what Kennedy stood for election in 1960 on the promise of 5% growth. And when he was elected, apparently he immediately turned to his economic advisor and said, do you think we can deliver on the 5%? And it's gone back to that. And they've stripped away the good adjectives. And I find it extraordinary that in the UK, that our government is going growth, growth, growth. And you heard it from Liz Truss, you heard it from Labour, like both sides of the house going growth, growth, growth. No qualification. And I've heard Rachel Reeves say, actually, we need to scrap this environmental regulation so that we can build houses, so that we can have growth. And I just think, are you sure that's the order in which this logic runs? So, it's a really interesting question. You know, if I had breakfast, lunch with Rachel Reeves, what would I say? I don't know. I don't know where I would come in because we are working from very different mindsets. And I do empathize with the context that she's working in. My strategy is not, I don't try and go head to head with people who disagree. It wears me down, and I much prefer answering the call of somebody who says, yeah, this makes sense. I work with the politicians who say, this makes sense, and I actually want to advocate for this in Parliament. I'm going to stand up and talk about it. I'm going to frame it. So in the UK, the only politicians I've heard stand up in Westminster and actually question endless growth were Caroline Lucas for the Green Party and Clive Lewis for Labour Party. They're the only two I've heard actually take that on. It's a really difficult situation in which to do it. And the UK economy, with this unequal, we've got, don't start from here, right? It's a really tough one. So I do think it's the existential question of the 21st century. And maybe there'll be a point at which growth just isn't coming. So instead of trying to squeeze it out by cutting this and cutting environmental regulation, cutting workers' protections to squeeze more growth, we'll actually be forced to move to a post-growth kind of economy where we actually focus on redistribution. But you know what happens? And we're threatened that the very wealthy will say, well, I'm out of here, I'm off to California. So again, you've got a collective action problem with tax havens and non-doms. And so again, it's a really tricky thing for any one country to take on when, if you try and actually take action, they slip out. I do have empathy for politicians. It's really tough.
So we're slightly over time. I'm
Yes.
going to take one more question. It's going to have to be a quick question and a
quick
quick answer. Please, go ahead.
Hi. So my question's about the diagram you had with all the different countries and the different donuts. And you mentioned reparations in one of your slides.
Yes.
I was very interested in your thoughts in terms of not just what we do within our own economies, but how do we fix the problems or help address the problems that we have caused through colonialism? And do you have any thoughts on that?
Thank you. Yeah, that's why it's really important to me in that slide. It starts with colonialism. It starts with the history. I'm an English woman, right? I mean, I have to start with the recognition of where I come from. You have to, I think you all have to think, who am I here? And therefore, what does that mean that I need to speak about and need to recognize? So thank you for bringing that back. Yeah, so in that scatter plot that I showed, all the high-income countries, they have had decades or centuries, depending on their national story, of through power relations, through imperialism, through colonialism, of just extracting, through unequal trade, through literally colonial occupation, of extracting from others. So even the starting point we're at is with a history of extreme inequality. So it makes sense that some might say, well, actually, you've caused huge ecological debt to us, you high-income countries, you've created the climate change, which is impacting every day on the people of Malawi and Bangladesh and undermining our ability to feed ourselves, undermining our ability to live where we live because it's flooded and we have to move. Climate reparations, ecological debt you owe us, but also colonial reparations. So, you know, what I put down against the arrow was just reflecting many different debates, and the reparations debate is very real. One of the challenges is that the conversation we were just having about in UK going growth, growth, growth. I mean, in a highly, even just take the UK alone, one of the most unequal countries in Europe, not getting the growth or the dynamism that the government wants. Like, the government doesn't want to start from here. And now you want to talk about reparations, right? So it's like, none of us want to start from here, either nationally or globally. So what I showed there, I realize, is a very challenging picture, but my point would be, why on earth should we, here in the global north, imagine that Malawi and Niger and India and Bangladesh would agree to transform their economies so that they always stay within their share of planetary boundaries in the ways that they seek to meet the needs of their many people who have not met their basic needs? I mean, why wouldn't they say, why should we do that? Look what you did. You went way over planetary boundaries. You're still out there. So you're going to have to transfer, you're going to have to provide me the technology, or we definitely need to rewrite some trade rules. I want reparations. I mean, what are you going to transfer to me to make me not follow the journey that you went on? Because you benefited massively from that journey. So this is a really key international dimension that, again, it's a collective action problem. It's power politics in the world, and it contributes to the complexity that we face. So we're going to end there. That's really tough. Yes. But one important thing to do is to start by recognizing it. Start by recognizing it. This is where we are. We really need to transform. This is not incremental little tweaks. We need to transform. And for me, the transformation begins with our mindsets. And that's why I'm really passionate about what the students who've just arrived at university around the world, including in this city, are being taught, because they are the economists of the 21st century, and they deserve a mindset that actually equips them for the complexity of this future. Yes, say something positive.
You sent me back to university when I had 2 small children, so you are doing something.
That's a great.
That is the best thing I've heard all day. Thank you.
So that is a great way to finish.
That is a great way to finish.
Thank you for all the questions. Apologies, there are loads of hands out there, but please remember to keep the conversation going. There's a reception downstairs, so I hope there'll still be a chance to talk to Kate a bit later on. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just invite Joe up to the stage. I think you should stay.
I should stay.
Yes.
I did say at the opening remarks, prepared to be wowed. I hope you have been wowed. I certainly have been, and I had the advantage of a little bit of a pre-presentation last night. Can you please all join me in thanking Kate for a tremendous lecture that clearly engaged with so many around the room on so many topics. I hope you are thinking in your own heads, going back to your societies, your communities, that you ever think, how could we adopt Doughnut Economics? Because there is clearly a resource there to help you and me, because I'm thinking about it right now. So please join me in the trend-honoured fashion of thanking Kate for a tremendous evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, come on. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much indeed. There's a lot of other people need thanked for making tonight happen. Some of whom you heard earlier. So if you please hold back on the appreciation of those to the end. Thank you. Secondly, my thanks goes to Professor Deborah Roberts for her introduction to Kate and for facilitating what is quite difficult to facilitate in the big theatre like this, such dynamic questions. Thank you. I'd like to thank Dr. Gary Gillespie, the Scottish Government, for his introductory remarks, which give us a little bit of a sign of what's happening in the thinking and indeed policy application of Scottish Government. We'll probably hear more of that in the coming months and certainly through next year. I would also like to express my huge appreciation to my Macaulay and James Hutton colleagues for all the effort they put into making this evening happen. It's been going on for almost from the point that the lecture last year finished. It is a huge commitment of time, and today I know, and tonight I know, they will have seen the rewards of that effort. So thank you so much. Lastly, I'd like to thank you, our audience. These would be very silent affairs without you. Thank you for your support, for your questions, both of which demonstrate a commitment of doing what you can to at least mitigate the climate and social challenges that stare us in the face. In closing the 46th TB Macaulay Lecture, I'd like to invite you all, as Deb said, to the Cromdale Hall downstairs for some refreshments, to witness some of the exhibitions of work that the James Hutton Institute is doing, and to speak with each other, share ideas. Never know, there might be some donuts coming out as well. Thank you all.